Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Degenerate NFL podcast. And we have Dalton here for the first time, who, if you watch our betting show, you know him very well, or our NFL draft show we had earlier this year. So if you are a returning viewer, you know Dalton very well. And, of course, Zach is back again. We weren't sure if we were going to have him, but we do. Luckily,
I got off work early.
Let go of his, actual, one of his jobs he has. So he could actually, come join us tonight. But we're going to continue our South division of the NFL preview. We didn't get to the AFC South in last episode because I was overzealous, thinking that we could actually talk about two whole NFL divisions in a timely manner, which that was my own fault. I should have known I was going to have to break it up a little bit, but we're going to take care of the AFC South.
If anybody can ramble, it's us.
Yeah, we can do that sometimes. Mostly, I think it was intelligent conversation, but it depends. I say more of my.
If I'm being honest, I think what ended up happening is we went a lot longer on the Saints than you probably thought we were going to. And then you were like, okay, well, they were the first ones on the list, so why wouldn't we go as long, if not longer, for everybody else? And it kind of threw everything off. So I can understand where the vision was, but then we started talking a lot about the Saints. And
they're just a mess.
There is admittedly a lot to talk about the Saints. We did talk a lot about the Saints. So
I mean, to be fair, a lot of these lower – like when we end up talking about like the really what we call the better divisions with all the better teams, it's fun to talk about them. We're going to talk about them more because they're going to do more and they're probably going to be more exciting. However, with these teams in the bottom, there's just as much to talk about them because these teams have made some of the bigger changes and we've seen a lot more turnover. So it's interesting how just because a team isn't doing good or isn't looked at as positive in the NFL standings doesn't mean you can't generate conversation on them. And we definitely catch ourselves there quite a bit.
And that's pretty much this entire division that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
For the most part. Yeah. So very good point, Zach. I think part of the reason why I wanted to start this series and this show with previewing all the divisions is because I know once we get into the season, we won't have as much time to cover the teams that are, 3-5 or 4-6 and that level of team because no one wants to talk about the mediocre teams. They want to talk about the best teams. They want to talk about the worst teams because that's where the interesting storylines often come from. So this is our chance to get our thoughts out there on every team in the NFL to some degree and just make sure that we have a baseline of what we expect to see from these teams, what we think about their off seasons, what their future projection is a little bit as well. And that's, again, what tonight is going to be for. We're going to be starting, of course, from the bottom, literally as bottom as it gets in terms of the record and standing last year with the Tennessee Titans. This is a team that I do think has a brighter future than they had before, but I don't necessarily think, and this is just a little bit of a spoiler, I don't necessarily think that they are better by much this season in terms of record and wins. That's kind of my general feeling of this team. We'll get into why that is, at least for me, and you guys can let me know if you feel the same. But generally speaking, I kind of feel like that's where I'm at with this team is they're more interesting. I don't know how much better they are, but let's get into it a little bit here. So to start off, talk about major changes that happen with this organization. We're going to start with the coaching staff changes. Nothing significant as far as head coach, obviously, or offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, anything like that. What they did do, and this is the biggest thing, something the Titans have been doing probably more than they should, given how much, and Dalton can speak on this as a Raiders fan, too much change is not always good. They fired their general manager for, I think, the third time in 5 years, something like that. I forget exactly how many times recently. But they fired GM Ren Carthon and hired GM Mike Borgonzi, formerly the Chiefs' assistant GM. So fair, if they're going to move on, getting someone from that Chiefs organization does make sense. We know how good they've been last almost decade now, really, it feels like. So it makes sense for them to do that, but they do make the biggest change at the top. They also fired their special teams coordinator, Colt Anderson, who I didn't double check this, but I'm 90% sure it's the same Colt Anderson that was a part of that horrendous special teams blunder for the Colts when they snapped it with no one, and they just got tackled immediately, however long ago. I'm pretty sure it's that same Colt Anderson that was involved in that play. But they fired him and hired John Fassel, who was formerly the Cowboys special teams coordinator. He's been around forever, really popular guy, probably going to be better than Anderson was. His team's special teams was a disaster, to be fair, so that's why he loses his job. anything as far as, obviously the GM situation, we won't really know what Bergonzi is going to bring until we see more of what he's doing beyond what we've already seen. But how do we feel about the decision to move on from the GM already with Tennessee?
I mean, you mentioned the Raiders. At least the Titans didn't get rid of they're at least getting rid of people like piecemeal. They made one firing.
That's
they
fair.
fired the GM. Now we'll see how the head coach we'll see it. Is it management or is it the coaching staff?
Right.
They still kept the same head coach. They didn't get rid of everybody every year
Right.
for like
Clean
a
house every
3-year
time.
straight period.
Yeah.
What they're doing at least makes a little sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get like the last GM, there were a lot of decisions that really weren't great. I mean, anytime as a GM you chain yourself to Will Levis, it's not gonna go great.
Yeah. Will Levis, man, made me some money last year being really bad, so good for him.
Yeah, and along those lines, I mean, you just look at some of the moves and the draft picks that just didn't really make sense. And look, it's you only hired him a couple years ago, or maybe even what was he last year?
I believe he was here for 2 years. If
So
I'm
okay,
mistaken.
2 years.
But yeah.
So I mean, if you can see that the writing's on the wall, and it's already there, and you're okay with Callahan as your head coach, then you go ahead, roll the dice. As you said, Shane, there's been a lot of success in the Chiefs organization, especially over the past 5, 6, 7 years. They've built a really solid franchise and a really solid roster. So yeah, you take a shot on one of their assistant GMs, one of their front office, or is GM technically front office?
Yeah, it's the front. Yeah.
Okay.
GM front, yeah.
I guess they're kind of like that go between the rest of the front office and the head coach. But you get somebody where they have proven success of building something, and you see how it works out. But again, it does kind of. I guess I can sit on the opposite side of this, is having a GM who I've watched fail year in and year out, and year in and year out, year in and year out. And
the Dolphins are on the other side of this.
But you just hope that finally you have the pairing that you need to create some cohesion and to start building a foundation for the franchise. Because while yes, it might be better than just jumping at just fire sailing everything, eventually you have to commit to somebody. Because then you end up looking like the Texans did a few years ago before they hired Ryans.
For sure. And I think with the GM hiring Bergonzi makes a lot of sense. He was a very popular name among those looking for that, to make that jump into being a GM. Does come from a system that has worked very well in Kansas City. We'll see how much of that he does try to replicate. He's obviously hoping that Cam Ward can be his version of Patrick Mahomes. Definitely lofty there, but I think just having a franchise quarterback in general doesn't necessarily have to be, the best guy or one of the best guys, but he's hoping that's going to be the case. And speaking of that, we're going to get into the offensive moves that this team made, ones that I think were noteworthy to think about here. So a couple of guys they lost. I didn't want to put this as a major loss, but he did play a lot of snaps for them because of Will Levis doing Will Levis things and also being injured. Lost quarterback Mason Rudolph, who's a solid backup, now back with my Pittsburgh Steelers. That's really the only guy that I thought played enough last year that they lost from. Okay, and you can mention him there. And then they did sign in free agency offensive tackle Dan Moore, also from the Steelers at one point. A big deal, but getting an even sort of capable tackle was just absolute necessity for this team with how their offensive line played last year. They also bring in another veteran in Kevin Zeitler to play offensive guard for them. Bring in Tyler Lockett as well, receiver. Those are the kind of major moves on the offense before the draft, at least, or not including the draft picks that I think are noteworthy. And I want to talk a little bit about the offensive line moves specifically, because even though Zeitler is very much near the end of his career and Dan Moore is not worth $20 million a year, I do think it helps bring this offensive line to a level of competency that will at least give the offense a chance to exist, right? That was the issue last year, was regardless of how you feel about Callahan's play calling or how the quarterbacks played, they really never stood a chance with the way the offensive line played.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest thing. Their offensive line at least is going to be good enough to where we can at least get a decent look at Cam Ward. I think that's the biggest thing.
And that was the key thing they had to do if they were going to make him the first overall pick, which very quickly became the fact that was going to be the case. they had to at least do this type of moves or these types of moves to make it feasible to get an idea what he's going to look like. So.
Yeah, and while I won't say that Will Levis helped himself last year, the offensive line definitely did not help him.
No, it
And
wasn't
when
good
you
at
have
all.
a unit that is that bad, your main goal is just raising the floor. You don't want to worry about the ceiling. You're trying to raise the floor to where you said, as you said, Shane, where the offense is just viable. Like we're not asking for the most dynamic offense in the NFL ever. We want to be able to get some plays off. That's it. So you raise the floor and get some not amazing talent, but quality people in to take over and just at least get some running lanes to get the pass protection going and actually have some competence on the line.
Yeah, and I think, and I want to talk about it a little bit more in a second, but I think just the idea now, you go into the season with, assuming everyone's healthy, there's 4 guys who I think you could at least say are competent starting NFL linemen, plus J.C. Latham now moving back to right tackle, his natural position, I think will make this offensive line at least not one of the 5 worst, right? Like that's kind of, you don't want to be one of those teams. If you're one of the teams that like you look at their depth chart and you're like, that's a bottom 5 offensive line, you do not want to be in that position because that's how you end up not finding anything out about your offensive roster. Like you could have really good running backs like they do. You know, Cam Ward could play reasonably well for rookie, and it might not matter because if that offensive line can't block anyone, you're not going to produce and you're going to get people fired. Like that's just kind of what happens with offense. So definitely those are big moves, even if you don't love the contract for Dan Moore, which I certainly don't, but thank you for that Titans 3rd round comp pick coming my team's way. So you got to wear the Titans hat for this one. But it's just, again, it's a move that even if the money doesn't make sense from like a logical standpoint or like how much Dan Moore should have earned, he is at least a guy that isn't going to get your quarterback killed most of the time. Like he's going to be able to deal with most rushers reasonably well. And Cam Ward can have some semblance of like confidence that his guys in front of him are going to win a lot of the time.
Yeah, it at least gives like the offensive line, I think, can be average at best, which I think is, for being honest, probably a great way to describe every area of this offense this year.
Kind of.
This offense, like every position group, you could say, like, if they can be average, that would be a win. Like, that's just
happy.
kind of what you're looking at. Looking at this depth chart, I mean, it's just the talent's just not there.
Yeah.
Even if Cam Ward is really good, really quick, the talent's just not there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, and we'll talk about the offensive moves in the draft because I think those are the key ones for this team outside of the offensive line additions. I think a lot of people are tempted to think that they could do the Washington thing from last year of like bring in an athletic young quarterback who can make stuff happen, make plays. And I understand we just saw it happen, but a couple problems with that. We'll get into it with this roster. One, I don't think Cam Ward is Jaden Daniels in general, not even just because from a talent standpoint, just the type of players they are. And 2, the receiving core that Jaden worked with had Terry McLaurin in it. And that alone beats everything that the Titans have going on kind of by itself. And that's the key thing. Yeah, and also the offensive line, despite being mostly unheralded, was a pretty good unit last year for the Commanders overall. It wasn't top 5 unit or anything, but
and they had a competent defense, and they had
with a defensive coach,
very good offensive coach.
Right, exactly.
Well, I think
don't know that about Callahan.
I think that right there is the biggest difference. And what I will say in fairness to the Titans is this will probably by far be the best offensive line that Cam Ward has played behind. If you go and track back behind and look at his college career, and I mean this man came from Incarnate Word, so like
originally,
But seriously, that's how. I mean, that's what he's been used to. So I mean, it's going to get better. And what you hope is that the improved floor of your offensive line is going to be able to let him thrive and not go on those off script and not go to the points where he makes those mistakes and it's the negatives that you see. So that's where I can see it could benefit him. Now, again, you don't have the wide receiver core, but I think the bigger thing that you guys just touched on is you don't nearly have the same amount of like addressing the defense, because that's what wasn't really like addressed much at all in the offseason. And it really doesn't stack up. They also have to take into consideration that Washington won a ton of one-score games.
They did.
And even they're lucky to have gotten as far as they got.
Yeah, it's tough to make that comparison. But again, anytime a team does that or a player does something we haven't seen really, everyone's looking for the next one. I don't think it's happening with Tennessee, but I do understand why some people might lean that way. But let's talk about the offensive draft picks specifically that I thought were notable. Of course, you got Cam Ward, a number 1 overall. A guy that, in terms of pure talent and upside, I understand betting on that when you had Will Levis at quarterback. If you don't do that, I do understand that. You get Chimere Dike out of Florida as receiver, Alec Manor, who I think that Dalton, I believe, I don't remember if you were higher or lower on him than the rest of us during the draft.
I had a late first grade on him.
Right, I thought so. So he was, again, a guy that I liked a lot, more of a second-round pick for me, but still a player that I thought would go earlier, but has some things that I think just scared teams away a little bit, specifically the hand. The hand stuff, some people worried about his hands and everything like that, so I kind of understand that. Gunnar Helm out of Texas was a quality tight end prospect as well. And Jackson Slater along the offensive line, more help for that group to add more depth there. I think there was a clear emphasis here on once you had Cam Ward in place, they wanted to make sure that they took shots at receivers that could be at least depth pieces for them, if not starters, sooner rather than later, with the lack of true standout weapons outside of, and again, not even really including Calvin Ridley. He's a good player. I'd say he's a good 2 in an offense. Ideally, he's got to be their 1, but you wanted to add more to that group, and they did that with the draft.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, Ridley and Manor, I think, could eventually, and Lockett could be a decent trio. I mean, decent in an offense where I think you would hope that the run game is the focal point, but that's also the problem. I mean, I know a lot of people really liked Tony Pollard a few years ago. He was everyone's favorite free agent running back. But I mean,
he was pretty great last year, to be honest.
Yeah, he did pretty good,
especially. So I understand. I think they'll be able to get away with running the ball. That might be their best thing they do offensively.
I think their bigger issue is the fact that Spears is hurt. That he got hurt.
He's apparently supposed to be back relatively soon. I heard.
Okay, good.
So hopefully that's the case. But those two as a duo is pretty solid. That's the best thing this offense has going for them, is that duo of running backs. Now they aren't top 5 in the league or anything like that, but I think that they showed last year they could be productive without a good offensive line. You hope it can be just as productive again this year, so
if not better.
Yeah. But yeah, the offensive moves I think make a ton of sense for what they're trying to accomplish, which is figure out what they have around Cam Ward, add to him as part of this draft haul. And there's another guy that I didn't put down because he was an undrafted free agent. It's tough to project with those guys, but his college teammate, Xavier Strepo, was there, and he could easily be a slot weapon for them. And I know the 40 time probably made him undraftable for a lot of people, but I don't think he's 4.8 slow. He might be 4.6 slow. 4.8, I don't know if he's 4.8 slow. So I think that's kind of one of those things you can excuse away, but he definitely has the chemistry at least, and I think he could make this team at least, if not have a role.
When speed and shiftiness is the main part of your game, you can't run that.
No, you can't. That's why he ends up getting undrafted. But I think he ended up obviously in the right situation in a weak receiver room with his college quarterback that he was most productive with. I think so too. So that's part of it for sure. But yeah, I think the offense in general, it's going to be better than last year because it's not Will Levis. I think Cam Ward has some Levis in him in terms of some of the turnover stuff. But I think he's much more capable of actually doing something in response to that, where Will Levis would just crater more when those things would happen. He would just kind of.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think we're going to get week to week stills of Cam Ward
on his knees. One of the funniest things that's ever happened in the history of the sport.
Well, I mean, but it was the fact that it was it wasn't just that one. It was 3 weeks in a row where it was.
Oh yeah, I made money betting on it happened.
He's diving or whatever. And it's just bro, can you just act normal? Throw the ball away. Stop being an idiot.
It can't be normal. This man puts mayo.
Go back to the locker room and put some more mayo in your coffee. That's what got you messed up right now.
Yeah, so definitely glad to move on from him. Unfortunately, Will missed the season. Will Levis with an injury, so you hope he's healthy. I have nothing against Will Levis other than that I don't think he's particularly good. But that doesn't mean he should get hurt.
I really question the timing of that decision. I really think they did that so that way they couldn't be pressured to bring him back.
Yep.
I mean, I don't really care why, but yeah.
Why not? Why not do it when the season ended? This didn't pop up out of nowhere.
Well,
listen,
I don't know.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Listen,
the timing is very suspicious.
He's going to spend the year getting healthy, and you know what's going to happen? They're going to next year. He'll get traded to Philly for like a fifth or sixth round pick. He'll be Jalen Hurts' backup after they trade McKee away.
Yeah.
And after they trade McKee to the Saints, and then.
Right.
That's so. Didn't they already?
And then what's going to happen is Hurts is going to go down, and he's going to go on some like weird late season run of like 3 games where he's going to look great in that offense.
He's throwing to AJ Brown and
And then
I mean, isn't this how Kenny Pickett got his job with the Browns?
That's what I mean. He's someone in like 3 years when he's a free agent, someone is going to give Will Levis $15 million a year for like 2 years.
Yeah, for sure.
To compete for a starting job.
The quarterback market is stupid.
It's fun to say the least. Yeah, that's where we're at. Let's move on to the defensive moves this team made, which again, not as much for sure. I would say they signed 2 players of note and lost another that was sort of notable. I think his numbers were better than his actual play, but they lose edge Harold Landry, kind of a mainstay for that team for quite some time out of Boston College several years ago. They bring in Cody Barton, who had a really good year for the Broncos last year, and interior defensive lineman Sebastian Joseph Day to add to that group. And then they draft edge Oluwafemi Oladejo, safety Kevin Winston Jr. as well, which I know both you and I, Dalton, were huge fans of Winston Jr. So I am really excited about that. I'm really excited about that for him. I think it's a great opportunity in that defense. And I think the Oladejo pick I'm curious about. I think that he's maybe 2 years away from being a good edge rusher as he only transitioned recently and isn't a freak like Abdul Carter who made that transition look like nothing. So I do think he's more of a long-term hope there, but he might play early with this edge room. I think they did definitely, I don't want to say abandon the defensive side of the ball this offseason, but they didn't focus on it as much because, one, I think the coaching that they got from Denard, I think it was Denard Wilson, the defensive coordinator there now. I think he did a good job as far as just coaching these guys up. They just didn't have the talent, frankly, and I still kind of don't probably. But I think adding Winston Jr. especially is big, and you'll see what you get out of Oladejo. But this was definitely an offensive off-season, and not offensive, but offensive, trying to build up that offense, allow Brian Callahan to do what he wants to do with it, and kind of see if they can make this work. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention with the defense here.
Yeah, ton of depth in the secondary too. At least
there is.
Front seven's going to be rough. Like it just is.
Outside of Simmons, it's just. I mean, Sweat as well. Really good nose tackle. Really good rookie year. But again, it's a nose tackle. So how much of that? But.
Yeah, it's just not going to be great. I mean, when you have Arden Keith starting in like a 3-4, it's going to be as 3-4 outside linebacker. It's kind of rough.
Yeah, the depth chart is not super kind to this defense. Again, you have guys who can play, but I mean, right now you're hoping Draymond Jones can be a good edge rusher when he wasn't for Seattle, and that's why he gets released. Or I don't remember if they got a pick for him when they traded him or what happened there, but you hope that he can do that. You hope Jarius Sneed isn't terrible, which would be good because they paid him a lot of money and traded for him, obviously. So you hope that figures itself out and he can be good. But again, it's just it's not the best group here.
They also could trade somebody because right now they probably have 4 starting caliber safeties on their roster. Which what are you doing?
Brought in. I mean, they do the 3 safety. I think Kevin Winston Jr. is going to be this team's nickel a lot of the time soon.
But then you got Amani Hooker, Xavier Woods, Kevin Winston Jr., and Quandre Diggs. You don't need all 4 of those guys. You don't. You don't need all Quandre Diggs at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, no one's giving anything up for Quandre Diggs at this point.
You might be able to get you could probably trade him to a team that has a backlog of defensive ends that needs some secondary depth. You could make a swap and get their fifth best defensive lineman who would probably be their third best defensive lineman.
That's fair. That might happen. I mean, we'll see. They could make a move there.
You're really telling me that the Miami Dolphins wouldn't ring them up and be like, hey, look, we got a problem here.
We got Minka Fitzpatrick and not a damn thing else.
Minka Fitzpatrick and Quandre Diggs in the same secondary in 2025 is hilarious. It's a hilarious thought.
It's a very hilarious thing to think about.
Is that better than Ashton Davis, though?
It depends on how you feel about Ashton Davis, but probably, yeah. So, there's that. Davis is definitely faster than Quandre Diggs. I don't know if he's more anything than Quandre Diggs besides that. So, you do what you got to do.
I don't know at this point. I mean, I get that. I would say Miami's, and we'll get there eventually, but their defense is just as rough to look at on the depth chart as this is.
Yeah, we'll get to them at some point in the near future. Let's talk about expectations for 2025. I'll just start us off. Mine are rather low. I kind of said this before we dove into things. I think this team is going to be more fun to watch. I think they're going to be more interesting and probably more competitive overall. But I don't know if the win total is going to be very different. I really don't get to the win total range we think for this team in a minute. But even if Cam Ward is, a good rookie quarterback, which, some people get – I think part of the problem with the way that some rookie quarterbacks have played recently, like it inflates how good people think rookies are supposed to be. Like rookies aren't supposed to be C.J. Stroud or Jay Daniels. Like they're not supposed to be that good usually, right? Like they don't have to be that level of player as rookies to be like good and to look like they're going to be the guy, right? So as long as he just has a good rookie season and the offense looks palatable and like actually like it works, that's kind of the only expectations I really have for them is that they figure out this offense. Callahan shows that he can be the offensive mind for this team as the head coach. And the defense continues to play hard and smart, but just probably gets out-talented most of the time. And then next offseason, they can address a lot more of that, focus maybe a little bit more on the defense to get that up to par, and then we can see what we have in a division that, admittedly, you only need one or two good off seasons to compete for being at least the second best team, if not the best team, with the way the Texans are. We'll get to them a little later, but they've done some stuff that I'm not exactly thrilled about, to say the least. So it's certainly attainable that they can get back into the division mix after really several years under Mike Vrabel of being one of, if not the best team in this division most years. So that's my expectations. What do you think with this team, Dalton?
Yeah, I mean, like I think you mentioned with Cam Ward, like I think a realistic expectation for him as like a rookie year is to have kind of like you guys remember like how like Kyler Murray's like rookie year and early years in the league looked like, where he was playing well, but the team was just not good. And
they were not reciprocating his his ability.
Yeah. I mean, now it's kind of like the opposite almost.
A little bit, unfortunately.
What's holding them back? We'll see.
We'll see.
That's for another show.
Yeah, we will get to that.
But yeah, I think that's kind of what you can expect from, like, what you kind of hope if you're a Titans fan out of Cam Ward is that he at least looks good. Like, he at least looks like there's stuff that you can build on.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't think, like, you can't really use wins to measure success for this team this year.
Not for this team, no. I don't even know if they want to win a ton because they kind of need the premium talent to get this team back into contention. You get that by being a top 5 draft pick, right? Like, that's kind of what you're a little bit hoping for. What do you think, Zach? Anything you want to add there?
I definitely feel like the floor for this team has definitely risen a little bit. I don't think that they are a bottom, like the worst team in the NFL anymore. But I don't feel like the ceiling has raised all that much. They're not going to be much better, but I do think some other teams have taken some major steps back to where, like, look, you can look at a team and say, oh, they were really bad this year, but in the grand scheme of things, their team wasn't that bad. I think there's going to be some teams this year that we're going to look at and be like, this is not good, and this is even worse than the Titans were last year, which is saying something.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. So let's talk about their win total range that we could see. And I'll just kick us off again. I think 4 wins is still the floor for this team. They won 4 games, or they won 3 games last year. I think they are better overall with Cam Ward at quarterback, almost assuredly. Like Will Levis just And just again, like I don't want to pile on the dude, but was quite literally a walking meme in the NFL. Like just was doing stuff that no one in their right mind would ever do on the football field every single week. It felt like so. That just really craters your floor. So I think 4 wins is about as low as I will give for most teams. It isn't as often as people probably think that teams lose more than or win less than 4 games in a season. So I'm going to put their floor at 4. And I think they could find their way to 7 wins in a division like this, where if you just go like 3-3 or even 4-2 by accident in this division, which is not impossible for any team, you could get up to 7 wins. But I think that would be a really great outcome on the field for them if they can get to 7 wins.
Yeah, I'm very similar to you on that, Shane. I'm at 4 to 6 wins. I think probably the reason why I'm a little lower on the ceiling is, as we'll talk about later, I'm probably a little more optimistic about the rest of the division. And I want to be. I think I struggle to see them winning more than 2, maybe 3 games in that division. And then looking at the rest of their schedule, I struggle to see more than a win or 2.
Yeah, it's not kind. The divisions.
I'm in that same 4 to 6 window. Again, I think the floor has raised just a bit. And if we're being real, maybe there were a couple games last year where they could have won, and they could have won 6 games.
They just didn't.
But it was still
Will Levis themselves out of the wins. Yeah.
And there was a lot of last second stupidity that flipped some
Bears game to kick things off.
So I don't think that 6 wins out of the question, but there's one team I'm a bit harsh on, but I do agree that I think maybe the overall outlook of this division is a little bit brighter than one may think.
Yeah. So I'll take care of the Titans. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had probably had the most, I would say, fascinating offseason of these teams, with the amount of moves they made and also the specific moves they made. One in particular that we'll spend a good amount of time on. But I think they're the team I might have the hardest time gauging how I feel about them as we head into the season, because my head tells me one thing, and the history of this team tells me one thing, and then how I actually want to feel about them tells me a whole other thing. So that's all I'll say for now. But let's
I think they had they and the Dallas Cowboys had 2 of the funniest off seasons, only because the beginning of the Jaguars season was off season was hysterical when Shad Khan had to sit there and wait for somebody to be like, oh yeah, I'll work with Trent Baalke,
couldn't do it.
And then finally got the message that, oh wait, maybe I got to get rid of this guy too. And then he finally fired Trent Baalke. Thankfully, it wasn't enough time to where Cohen was still available. I think that probably might have been one of his top choices. There was some other ones that he might have wanted to get, but it wasn't necessarily a backup entirely.
But was Cohen?
Was
Cohen available, or was he kind of a scumbag?
Oh, right there, that just conflated everything even more.
That's the eternal question of the Jaguars offseason. Was it ethical?
Yeah, so it was really funny to go from one. Obviously, you should have fired Doug Peterson way in the season and just kicked that can down the curb. But again, we know Shad Khan. He's not going to do that. He doesn't do that in the middle of the season. You get to go and see the last week, and then the second that it hits the final buzzer or the final whistle, you're done. Get out of here. I don't want to see you again. And he did that for Doug Peterson, but he should have been doing that for Baalke a long time ago. Everybody had said this when he got hired. It was just a long time coming. I don't mind them shooting their shot on James Gladstone.
That's what we say. We'll talk about all the coaching staff changes and moves right now. So let's start with the GM situation, as you alluded to, Zach. They mercifully fire Trent Baalke, who was pretty much just building a case for like the most destructive person in the history of the sport at the GM position with the way he was doing things, both near the end of his tenure with the Niners and then his tenure with this team. To bring in James Gladstone, the Rams scouting director, who, again, the Rams, you hear scouting director, you're like, the Rams don't draft anyone, or at least they haven't for a long time. But I'll tell you what, when they do make draft picks, They're pretty good. So
you want to see a team that consistently hits on
yeah,
fourth, fifth, and
because that's
sixth
all
round
they
draft
got
picks. Go to the
for a long time. That's
Rams.
all he had to work with. No, so I do like that move. I think that is something that could definitely work out in a big way. He already made his mark very quickly. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Fire again, Doug Peterson as head coach, and hired Liam Cohen, formerly the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, who we all thought was still going to be there and then wasn't, and then he was. It's a whole thing. We don't need to go through all of that, but let's just say it was a little tumultuous to say the least, that situation. But ultimately, he lands with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They fired offensive coordinator Press Taylor, of course, as part of the Doug Peterson. He was about his Press Taylor, dude. I don't even want to talk about him. Hire offensive coordinator Grant Udinski, formerly the Vikings offensive assistant, or one of their offensive assistants. And they bring in Anthony Campanelli to be their new defensive coordinator, formerly the Packers linebacker coach. Now, I will say that's
crazy. They hired my bartender. That's my bartender's name.
It's your bartender's name is Anthony Campanelli?
Anthony Campanelli. Anthony Campanelli, I kid you not.
Huh. Relation, perhaps? No. Anyway.
The last name is spelled slightly different.
Okay, it's a little bit different. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I just want to start this off. I think the coaching staff, in theory, from a just schematic standpoint, what they're trying to go for, I love it. I do. I do love the idea of this. However, we are talking about the Jaguars, and the fact that they had to do what they had to do to make this coaching staff come together does just give me not so awesome vibes, to be fair. So I'm partially in, kind of mostly in on just the actual ability of these coaches, but part of me wants to pause myself and be like, is this going to work in Jacksonville though with these guys? I don't know. But overall, I like the coaching staff. What do you think, Dalton?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I thought I liked Liam Cohen, but I don't know the way that whole thing went down, and also there's one move that he's already made as a head coach. We'll talk about it when we get more into the player side of this team.
Mm-hmm.
There's already one move with a very important player that I already think is the exact opposite of what you should do. We'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep getting bust vibes from him, like that it's going to be a disaster. I keep getting head coach bust vibes from him, and I do worry about that. I don't know. I think there's potential for this team to be really good, and I think with his offense, it should be very good given what's there. But I just don't know.
Yeah, and I want to get your thoughts on this for a second, Zach. But before I go to you on that, I want to just preface with any offensive, especially in my opinion, offensive coaches that you hire to be your head coach. Obviously, there's an inherent advantage to doing that if they're a great one, because it's really easy to find defensive coaches that you can bring into if you do lose a defensive coordinator who are more likely to be capable defensive coaches. There's a lot of good ones across the league. It's a lot easier to replace those guys than if you hire a defensive coach and then your offensive coordinator is great. They're going to get sniped very quickly. You're not going to have them very long. So there's an inherent advantage to that. However, being a head coach is a lot more than being a play caller on either offense or defense. There's a lot that goes into it, and you never know if a guy's built for it. And with some of the stuff that happened with Cohen and his process to get here, I do think it's fair to wonder if he's got the mentality for this, if he has, if he's going to be able to command the locker room the way you have to be able to do it and build trust with their guys. It's just a question that we won't know the answer to for probably a while. Even if they don't do so well right away, doesn't mean that that's the case. But it is more than just being a great play caller now that he is a head coach. So just want to preface that. But Zach, what do you have any more thoughts on this coaching staff in general?
I hear you on your building trust with the team. I don't necessarily feel like it's going to be a problem when this is the team that he chose and he burned his other team. I feel like if he had done this and then just been like, oh, you know what, never mind, no, I'm going back to the Buccaneers, I think it'd be a lot harder for him to regain that trust. But I mean, homie low key tarnish his reputation to go to them. So why would they not trust him? They're like, you chose us.
You
So
hope
I think
that's the
gonna
case,
play
right?
really
Like
big in his
you
factor.
hope that they treat it that way. Yeah.
I mean, just with the way that like human psyche works, stuff like that. Like, I mean, if that's who he chose,
He chose
they're
me.
gonna feel the
he
love.
chose us. It's like, yeah, but
Yeah, exactly.
I get what you're saying.
So I mean, he had a contract on there, and he was like, "No, I'm sorry, I'm backing out. I want to go take this responsibility." So I think that might not play as bigger. But to your point about an offensive coach becoming a head coach, he needs to make sure that Grant Udinski is able to, one, run his offense, and
help take care
if
of that.
he wants to have success, carry the responsibility, but like make sure that he's able to do it in the same manner that he's able to do it, because he's not going to be able to be just that play caller on the sideline that's only focused on offense, because no, you're the head coach. That's not what being a head coach is anymore. And I have had to watch somebody learn this very tough, and not having consistent offensive or not even offensive, but consistent coordinators. You really need to make sure that if you're going to be a new head coach, that your coordinators are solid in what they do. And if they're going to be first time, that they're going to be able to completely fit into with what you are doing and able to show your vision. Because unfortunately, with what is involved in being a head coach, you're not going to be able to micromanage to that extent of what you were known for. You're going to have to focus on both sides of the ball. You're going to have to focus on the special teams. You're going to have to be watching the game to watch for timely decisions and downs of like, oh, no, you have the challenge flag. You need to decline the penalty. You need to call the timeout. Those are all on you. Those take away from those moments when you want to sit there and be like, okay, well, let me game plan for the offense real quick and make some adjustments, some changes. It's not going to be the same. So is he going to be able to make that adjustment? That's really going to be is he able to command the sideline in that way and have the trust of the people to run the offense and have a competent defense from his coordinator that is going to have success.
Yeah, that's the case for any first-time head coach, right? Like that's just something they have to figure out. And I will say he did a lot of work on the offense to bring in guys. There's one guy in particular that we'll talk about that I think is going to actually be a major deal here, because he knows the offense, and I think he can help the players know the offense. So about the offensive moves here. So they lose Mitch Morse to retirement, their center, but they traded Christian Kirk away to the Texans. We'll talk about that move more for the Texans in a minute. Released wide receiver Gabe Davis, tight end Evan Ingram. So they do lose some offensive pieces from this past year, but they bring in guys, specifically Diami Brown, a wide receiver who had, I think, a up and down season for the Commanders, but a pretty productive one. Patrick McCarry.
As a fantasy owner of Diami Brown, that was the best dang season he's ever
definitely
had.
His most productive season. They bring in offensive lineman Patrick McCarry from the Ravens, kind of a do-it-all guy, can play all across the line. Bring in Chuma Edoga as a backup tackle, and this is a big one, who's going to be their center, Robert Hainsey, who played with Cohen with the Buccaneers. I think his addition here, even if I think he's just a fine starter in the NFL, probably more towards the bottom of starters at center, he knows the offense. He's going to be a big help for getting the offensive line on the same page, and more importantly, just the offense in general kind of getting on the same page. It's very helpful, and that's why you see guys a lot of the time follow coordinators to where they become head coaches, especially if it's an offensive coach bringing in a lineman or receiver or even a quarterback at times, just to help kind of get the group in line with what they want to do, right? It really helps having a player who knows what he's doing and not just the coach. So that's a big move for them for sure on the offense. And then you have the offensive moves they made in the draft. So let's talk about him first here. Travis Hunter at number 2 overall after a huge trade up seems to be in line to play a lot of receiver early on. And I knew this is where Dalton was going with when he was talking about a decision that he didn't like very much. I thought as a receiver, Hunter was really great prospect. Obviously, he's rare ball skills especially for his other position at corner, but even as a receiver, fluidity, good speed, all that stuff. Really good receiver prospect. But as I think Dalton's about to tell you, because I'm going to go to him first, it is a question of whether he should, one, play both sides that often to begin with, especially as a rookie, and two, which side of the ball should he focus on. So Dalton, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I feel like us on the draft show and pretty much everyone else in existence said, like, if you're going to play both ways in the NFL, the way it would work is you'd be a starting corner and then be like the third and play like the 3 wide receiver packages and third downs in red zone. Like that would make the most sense where you still get everything out of him that you need. Because like third down and red zone are really where he shines as a wide receiver.
Yeah, just the money downs, gotta have it.
And his ball skills,
yes.
You need those ball skills then.
Yes.
But it makes no sense to have a guy be your full-time starting wide receiver and then be like part of the secondary, but like a depth piece. Like you can't sometimes play corner. That's just not how defense works. You can't It's all about being a cohesive unit as a team and playing together. And you can't have him sometimes play defense and then like how at that point he's just not a corner.
Yeah.
And that feels like a waste because, in my opinion, I think he's a better corner than he is a wide receiver, to be honest. But even besides the point, like 90% of his value is that he is a two-way player. Like he can be, I think, a good to very good player on either side of the ball. But what makes him great and why you drafted him so high is because he can play both ways. And you kind of just made that almost impossible in my opinion, I think selfishly on Liam Cohen's part because he needs that offense to work because that's his billing, that's his reputation. I think he's selfishly going to use him as a full-time wide receiver, and he's not going to be a corner.
Yeah. So I have a take on this that I think that might mitigate some of the concern with it, but I do want to get Zach's thought on that situation before we finish up talking about the other offensive draft picks. But do you feel kind of the same, Zach, with that? Do you think that the way that they're handling him as a rookie is a mistake in terms of his usage, or do you think that ultimately he's going to be able to do whatever it is they ask of him at a high level regardless?
I think this is where that trust thing is going to come into a factor because I think Travis Hunter made it very, very clear. Excuse me, they call him by his actual name, two job Travis Hunter. Made it very clear that he wants 2 jobs in the NFL for some reason because playing one side of the ball is not enough to scramble your egg and possibly end your career. He wants to be on both sides. Yeah. And the Jaguars were a team that said, yes, we will grant you that opportunity. So if they go this route, I mean, I think maybe him want the more time that we're hearing about receiver, I could totally hear that from Travis Hunter of him saying, nah, I'm not playing wide receiver 3. I'm part of the offense too. However, if they are going to go through with this whole depth thing and he's not going to be on the field, I don't see how that works because as you guys said, as a lot of the stats show, he's a lot better as a corner than he is a wide receiver. And you would be wanting him on that kind of thing. So if it was really, oh, yes, he's going to be starting in the secondary, but then no, he said, I want to do wide receiver full-time as well, that'd be one thing, but that's not what we're seeing. I guess my major, and I'm waiting for it to come, my major question is if he plays meaningful snaps on both sides of the ball, because we're not talking about a quarterback who is going to rush the ball because he's always going to be on offense. We're not talking about a wide receiver who's taking a snap out of the backfield because he'd still be on the field for that play. How do you value him? When it comes to contract time, you're talking, and if he does it successfully, and we're just going to pretend like he does it successfully, how do you value a player who is actively playing 2 positions at once at a starting level? It's kind of crazy to comprehend because it's going to break a lot of conventions that we have for contracts because that just doesn't compute. It doesn't make any sense. And like, again, I don't think we're going to get there because I don't know how reasonable it is to expect somebody to be able to hold up that long. The toll that playing one side of the football takes on your body is so much that the idea of him being able to get there for 5 years, because if he's playing that well, they're going to take the 5th year option. There's no way they don't. It's going to be crazy. So He wants to say he's going to do this and play this way, but really with what we've seen with the way the human body and football gets along, doesn't really seem like it's that much of a possibility. We can be proven wrong, and I would love to see that because I want my question answered. Because again, it's going to break everything. How do you do that? But the whole situation is very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the Jaguars take it. And with it being your second overall pick, I feel like he's going to have to play some sort of meaningful time on both sides of the football to justify the trade up, not justify the second overall pick, but justify what you traded up to get.
Yes. Now, I think all that's fair. I think for me, the reason why I think beyond just, again, I do think Liam Cohen probably wants him to be an offensive piece this year. He wants to get this offense going as fast as possible to justify him being the head coach of this team, because that's how he does it, is being a top 10 offense, right, as fast as possible. I also think the reason why he's focusing on offense, or seems to be focusing on offense, is because, frankly, it is just a lot harder to digest the playbook of an offense than it is a defense. There's a lot more things to think about. There's a lot more things to worry about. And I think the timing and all that stuff is something you have to just work at. Defensively, not saying he doesn't have to work on that, but I think he did mostly focus on defensive meetings in college. The receiving playbook for him wasn't very big. He didn't have to do a lot of different things at Colorado. I think there's much more learning curve for him to learn NFL wide receiver. And I think once he has it down, then you might see that start to flip where he is a primary starting corner and then plays receiver as much as he can, right? Like that could be what ultimately happens here. But for him to get to the point where he can do that, they'd rather him know the whole playbook on offense. That way they don't have to only use him in key situations. They can have the liberty of saying, well, maybe we want you to play a little bit more receiver this week because the offense we're playing, we're not as worried about their receivers, but we're much more worried about their corners and trying to beat them, like whatever, right? Because I think that's ultimately the best way to use him is what do you need more that week? Do you think you're going to need his offensive juice? Do you think you're going to need his ability to make plays on the football? Are you playing a quarterback that's going to give him chances to turn the ball over? Like that is probably what's going to end up happening as the season goes along is like, what do they need more? Honestly, also, like if they get an injury at receiver, he's probably going to be playing mostly receiver. If they have an injury at corner, he's probably going to slide in as like. I think the inherent value with him as an NFL player is you get basically 2 roster spots in one. Like you don't have to use him on both sides constantly, but you can. And if you need to, he can just play one or the other because you have a need there. Like it does open up essentially like a 54th spot on the roster.
Yeah, I get that, and that's fair. My thing is, how do you explain that to your defensive coaching staff and your and your other and the rest of the secondary? Like, how do you explain that to Jerry and Jones? Like, hey, yeah, sometimes you're going to be our starting corner, and other times you might only play 10% of the defensive snaps. Or
it's tough. It's a new thing, right? It's a new. They have to figure it out.
I know he's been spending a lot of time on offense, but I'm sorry, he's better.
Like they have to figure it out, right? Like that, and it's
like
new
on offense, I feel like you can do that.
It's better than getting cut.
Yeah, but like on offense, I feel like you can ride the hot hand.
Like, yeah, it's easier to do that. Yeah.
You can like say, all right, this week this guy's going to be the focal point of our offense. Like this guy's going to get a lot more touches. This guy's going to get a few more snaps, especially like with your receivers. You know, like sometimes we're going to be in a lot more heavy personnel. Sometimes we're going to be playing a lot more receivers. With a defense, it's you've got maybe 15 to 18 guys that you're rotating in on a regular basis. And like, that's your core and there's a system. Like, I feel like I just don't see how it's going to work. You also like often and like substitutions, like offense, you control substitutions. You decide when we're subbing. On defense, you don't. So like, you can't just, if he's part of your starting defense, great, but you can't just say, oh, we'll throw him in certain situations because you might not be able to.
Yeah.
And like, it just doesn't work. And
again, I agree for the most part. I think that is a part of why he's being used the way he is to start his first NFL season. I don't necessarily think it's going to stay that way, even within the first year, but especially going forward. If Cohen sticks around and that playbook is going to be mostly the same offensively, that's when he doesn't have to spend as much time with the offensive group. He doesn't have to spend as much time doing that stuff.
That's fair. I just think we're putting a lot of faith in Liam
Cohen.
Oh,
we are, and that's the whole thing. And if you're a fan of the Jaguars and you think they're going to be good this year, that's what you're doing. You're putting your faith into Liam Cohen's ability to make this whole thing work. Two other moves they made on the offense in the draft that I thought were notable: offensive lineman Wyatt Milam. We'll see what he does for them as depth for now, I believe. And then Bashal Tootin, more juice in the backfield. You always love to see that. Yes, and of course, Virginia Tech.
Let's go. Virginia Tech represent.
There for Zach.
I'm amazed McDaniel did not.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? How many more fast guys could he possibly want at this point?
I mean, I would totally just look at them and be like, "Hey, you can have Jalen Wright. I just want to be
fair." But
I mean, I want as many Hokies on my roster as possible. Of course.
So that again, the offense, I do think the pieces are there for it to be a very good unit if the offensive line can hold up and Cohen is who we think he is as a play caller. So move on to the defensive side of the ball. So they bring in, again, Anthony Campanile from the Packers. They ran very much that Robert Saleh-esque, like very aggressive 4-2 front. So that's what you kind of expect them to do here. They have I think, especially up front, they have the personnel for that. Back end, especially if Hunter's not playing there, it could get a little dicey. Let's talk about the moves they made, though. So they lose safety Andre Cisco, who admittedly was playing well for them until last year, and then kind of just everything kind of fell apart for them, to be fair, but especially last year for him. So they bring in Eric Murray in free agency, safety from the Texans. They bring in Jordan Lewis to be the new nickel for them. They bring in some edge depth with Emmanuel Ogbah, did Dwayne Smoot as well, kind of that inside-out piece as well on the defensive line. Same thing with Austin Johnson as an interior player. And they also bring in a guy that, like, he's been weirdly productive for the Cardinals, but he's like a really weird build. But it's Dennis Gardeck as an pseudo-edge linebacker type. So he's an interesting guy. And then, of course, you have to include Travis Hunter in this list as well for the defense, what he can do. Caleb Ransaw, the defensive back, could play safety corner for them. We're not sure yet with that. And Jack Kaiser, the linebacker from Notre Dame. I think these defensive moves are really more about just kind of building the floor up compared to what we saw last year, trying to have more depth in the secondary and then the front seven, trying to at least give them a chance to be a good enough unit talent-wise for the new defensive coordinator to make his system work. And I think in general, they did a pretty good job with that. What do you think, Dalton?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall the defense is solid. I mean, it really comes down to, what that front four does. I mean, that front four has a ton of potential.
It does.
It's just a matter of, can Eric Armstead, maintain his high level of play? And, we know Josh Allen is going to do, he's going to do his thing, but can Travon Walker, give us something? That's kind of the big thing. I mean, on the opposite side, I think the potential there is so high.
Mm-hmm.
And if the front four is good, I think everything else has the potential to at least be serviceable. If you have a strong pass rush, but that's going to be the biggest thing. And I think overall, I think the defense has a shot at being, at least average.
And that's what they need for this to be a successful season. They need the offense to be what they hope it can be with Cohen, and the defense to at least allow them to win games by being above average unit on offense and just being okay on defense. So I think, again, the front four is where you get that value. If you can hit on those guys and those guys can all have good seasons. And another guy to throw out there, Mason Smith is a wild card, but I think he is going to play a lot in the middle of the defense as well. So he has the talent, just didn't really do much with it until kind of the back end of his rookie season. He showed a little bit. But yeah, like that's what it kind of comes down to. Anything you want to add there, Zach, with the defense?
I agree with you. I think with the end of the season, both the offense and the defense had the floor just pulled out from underneath them, and everything just fell apart. And what you look at the trenches on your defense, and you say, let's invest in some depth. Let's make sure we have rotation. You add into the secondary, and then you focus on the offensive line and try and focus on some weapons for your offense, and really try to batten down the hatches. And I mean, you admire what happens. Just this is also coming in a year where you have a lot of head coaching changes and a lot of coaching changes in general. Is everything going to transpire at the exact same time?
That's what it comes down to with the defense. So I think, again, they've raised the floor Not sure about the ceiling, especially if Travis Hunter doesn't play a lot of corner for them. We'll see. That's kind of, I think, the big thing is how much they get from him. The rest of the guys they brought in really more for depth purposes, especially in 2025. Let's go to expectations for 2025. And I want to start with Zach here because I feel like I don't really know, for me especially, that's why I kind of want to get your thoughts on this too, because I don't really know where to set the expectations for this team because I don't know what their own internal expectations should be even. Like it's because I usually kind of start from like what are they trying to accomplish, and then do I think that they're going to be able to do it or not. With Jacksonville, like I'm struggling to kind of determine what they hope this year actually ends up looking like. So what do you think the expectation should be for them?
I mean, they're going for a weird tear down. We're hoping that nothing is changing and we're still competitive like we were a couple years ago. And I feel like if this coaching change benefits anybody, it's
Yeah, we haven't talked about.
You really hope at the bare minimum, the result of this season is Trevor Lawrence has his groove back. It's looking like what we thought he was going to be. He feels more comfortable. The offense looks more alive because that's really where the disappointment has come is you really feel like you have your franchise cornerstone and you think you do, but it's just with some of the coaching insanity and some of the roster building that we've seen the past few years, you're kind of he's turning into this weird like Ryan Tannehill-esque idea of like, does he need another year? Does he need another year? Does he need another year? Is it his fault? Absolutely not.
Overall,
he has been dealt a very tough hand. And injuries have also not helped and inconsistent play have not helped. But with what he's had at his disposal, I mean, the inconsistent play can make some sense at times. So I think that's really what your expectations are this season is Trevor Lawrence comfortable and are the weapons that we already had before adding some of your new ones? I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. was amazing last year. And you know that you have the wide receiver 1X right there, that he is going to be your guy to carry this offense because, I mean, it was fantastic. But is De'Ami Brown enough to be a wide receiver 2? Or does that mean that if he's not, you're going to have Travis Hunter be that wide receiver 2? He's going to have to step in that role. Can ETN come back and have a bit of a presence? And that's going to be a big thing with the offensive line. So you're really, really hoping that you're bringing in Cohen and he revitalizes this offense and it looks a bit more like it did a few years ago when things looked like they were starting to get a bit positive and the Jacksonville's on the up. But I also think that there's a really good chance that it can just not – it can't happen.
Yeah. What do you think, Dalton, with this team?
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat. Like, I mean, it could be the ceiling, I think, is pretty high for this team. I mean, I think we could see this team being, possible playoff team and in the mix for a wild card spot. But, I mean, it could also be really, really bad, like really easily. When you talk about Trevor Lawrence, like the thing with Lawrence is we still really have no idea, like, what his level is because, looked rough at first till Doug Peterson came in, and then it looked like Doug Peterson was doing his thing where he turns things around for quarterbacks, and then he went back to being Doug Peterson after year one, which is just not great. And so now we just don't know. We just don't know what Lawrence is going to look like. And also, I think Liam Cohen, I think a lot of the reason why Liam Cohen got this job has been what happened with Baker Mayfield. But we also don't know who's really responsible for Baker. Is it Baker? Is it just the Browns were just ruining him? Or is it Dave
Pretty easy
Canales?
to make that argument,
Could have also been Dave Canales more than anything. Or was it Liam Cohen? We really don't know yet. And we're going to really find out a lot about both Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence, I think, this year. And it's going to be fascinating.
To be fair to the Buccaneers and Liam Cohen, it's not like Baker stayed around in Carolina.
Yeah. So I think my expectations for this team, I think I want to see them get back to the trajectory they were on in 2022, where they make the playoffs, they look good in that playoff loss. To be fair to the Chiefs, where they get to the divisional round, But I think they need to get back onto that track of like Trevor Lawrence is clearly at least a tier 2 quarterback, a guy that can be a reason why you're winning and not just part of the reason. If he can look more like that version of himself, which we saw for about a year and a half, really until he got banged up in 2023, he looked the part of that type of player. And really ever since then, he hasn't. So it's what version of him do you get? Can Cohen unlock what we know is a very talented player who was destined to be the number one pick out of high school, basically, like kind of lived up to those expectations of college? Can he get him to that level of like clearly a reason why you're winning and not just along for the ride, which is really kind of how he's played the past, I'd say like 16 starts or so of his career. So that's the biggest thing. And then also you have to just establish like your identity as an offense and as a defense, but especially again the offense with an offensive head coach. Can you run the football effectively? Which is honestly the best thing Cohen did for the Bucs last year, is open up that run game and allow them to be a balanced offense that allowed Baker Mayfield to throw for 40 touchdowns because teams had to worry about the run game. Like that's a big thing. And if he can do it with this group of running backs, which I think it's a deep group, I don't know if it's a great group necessarily. We'll see what they can get out of these guys. I think that's the key thing is, can he replicate the success he had with the Bucs, or was it more than just his offense that was doing that, right? Like the Bucs might end up, as we talked about last week, Zach, like they might be just, that might just be how good they are and not just how good Liam Cohen is. So I think the expectations is to get back into the playoff mix, if not make it. And again, like you kind of touched on, Zach, how good can Trevor Lawrence be under Cohen? So let's finish up the Jags with the win total range here. I want to see Dalton first. What do you think for the range here? This might get the widest range of any of these teams, I'd imagine.
So my floor for them is 3 wins. I think 3 wins is kind of about like, I mean, just looking at the schedule, I mean, really depends.
It's a tough schedule too,
yeah. It is, but it's also the schedule kind of depends on what a lot of those teams turn out to be. There's a lot of
it's question marks across the board.
Yeah, and also like I don't know. I think they're going to be playing in a lot of ugly, weird one-score games all year. I just think that's going to be their season.
Probably.
And they could lose a lot of them and end up with 3 wins, which honestly might not be the worst thing for this team if like it at least looks promising. If you're Liam Cohen, like things look well, you can say, all right, this is what I've got. Now I can bring in my guys. And maybe that's when you decide Trevor Lawrence isn't my quarterback and you draft somebody, which very well could be. I don't think Trevor Lawrence has earned this title of like definite franchise quarterback.
It has to be the quarterback. Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's something that could definitely happen. What do you think on the high end then, though?
10 wins, playoff team. Like, right. I mean, if it's all working right, that defense is solid enough, and they're getting after the quarterback, they're generating turnovers, and then the offense is just really humming, really controlling the ball. Hunter's out there keeping drives alive, and they're just ETN's rushing for 4.5 yards a carry. Everything's going really well. That's kind of the peak. I think this team could easily be in the playoffs if everything goes correctly, especially in that division.
Fair enough. What do you have, Zach, for their win total range?
My window is a bit smaller and my floor is a bit higher. I'm going to go 6 wins as a floor. I do feel like that they're going to be fine. I do think that they're going to have a fine season. I'm hedging my bets with it cannot work, but there is a possibility for doom and gloom. But I do think that the overall status of this roster puts it at a decent spot to where 6 wins is feasible no matter how bad the year goes. I do think they can be 10-11 win team and make it in the playoffs possibly. I mean, we'll talk about Houston a little bit, but depending on what they do, maybe squeak out a divisional win. It would take a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get down to the last few weeks of the season and they're fighting for it. So I definitely see them more on the positive side, though, than the negative side.
Yeah, I have their floor at 5. I think They're going to be a better football team last year. They won 4 games last year. I think it'd be very surprising if they weren't able to repeat that plus another win, or probably 2. But I'll say 5 because, again, if Trevor Lawrence goes down again, or any number of things can go wrong, and it's not really so much their fault, but it's just how it works out. And then I think I'm going to leave the floor or leave the ceiling at 10 as well, as far as Dalton had too, because if they have a similar season to what they had in 2022, but with a higher floor offense and also honestly a higher ceiling one probably too with the receiving talent they have, that probably buys you an extra win or so than you would have otherwise. So I think this could easily be a playoff team. This is the first team of these, obviously of the 2 that we've covered, that actually I think has a chance to be competitive in 2025. But let's jump over to our next team. That oh boy. The Indianapolis Colts. Man, I don't even know. The Colts, they're one of the toughest teams for me to talk about because they do a lot of things very well. But the one thing that they just can't do well, and it dates back to the Andrew Luck situation and everything that happened with that, is they just can't get the right quarterback into this group and allow this roster that otherwise is pretty good in a lot of areas, if not most areas, to just be a consistent playoff contender and actually fight for this division. And they simply can't do it because they cannot figure out the most important position in sports. And now, as I talk about that, we're going into the season, and we'll talk about the offensive moves in a little bit here after we talk about the admittedly minor moves that they made in the coaching staff area, which I shouldn't say minor. There's one major move that I think is going to be helpful overall, but still, they're going into the season with freaking Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson as the 2 quarterback options. That's just not competitive, man. I'm sorry. It just isn't. And that's going to be the basis of a lot of talk around this team.
Am I going to be the one to have to do it?
Go ahead, Zach. What do you have to say?
I don't want to speak ill on the dead.
Okay.
But the big hindrance here is no longer a glooming terror over the organization anymore. I have a lot more faith in Jim Irsay's daughters to run this organization than I did in Jim Irsay.
Yeah.
And rest in peace to Jim Irsay. But I think the Colts are better off that he is not there to pull the strings anymore.
Okay. Well, that's neither here nor there. Because the problem is,
hey, we have to be honest. This is one of those weird teams where the owner has way too much power in what happens on a day-to-day basis in the team. Right. And like some of the decisions that he has made for this franchise were insanity.
For sure.
Just straight
for
stupid.
Sure.
And I literally sit there and in regular conversation with people when I go out and play disc golf or do something else. Like if they're a Colts fan, they don't bring up the coach. They don't bring up that. They will bring up Chris Ballard.
Yeah.
But Jim Irsay comes up so much amongst a lot of other teams. And like, look, I mean, I hate to bring up the Dolphins, but that's my favorite teams. That's who I have to compare about. I would much rather sit here and deal with Stephen Ross day in and day out than have to root for a team that had Jim Irsay as their owner. I'm sorry. That's just cut and dry. And Stephen Ross has made some dumb decisions, but like, no. I like it. Again, rest in peace to Jim Irsay. But this is probably one of the better things that has happened for the Colts organization. I have so much more faith in it.
Well, that's the hope, is that things get
they look like they know what they're doing.
The hope is they can keep things rolling here. Let's talk about the one major coaching change real quick before we get into their moves they made this offseason. They let Gus Bradley go, who he was a pretty baseline defensive coordinator, but liked to do his thing and not much else. And they bring in the fired Bengals defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, who admittedly was a really good defensive coordinator and probably still is one. But then, they were like, here's 0 players. Have fun with that. Here's Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, all that money is going to offense.
Might as well, again, Trey Hendrickson and nobody else of note, pretty much. Have fun with that.
Here's Trey Hendrickson, but wait, no, here's not Trey Hendrickson.
And even then, he isn't even there to not have Trey Hendrickson now, so he doesn't have to worry about it. Yeah, so overall I like this move because I think it's just a higher floor, not even higher floor, it's a higher ceiling coach here at defensive coordinator. You can expect more potential out of this group than what they've gotten, which again has been a good defense under Bradley, but I think it was very just baseline good, right? Like nothing crazy schematically, nothing to write home about. Just you're not going to get this team constantly in bad positions, but you're also probably not going to deal with them being a shutdown unit very often either. So, yeah, it's tough, but that's the only major coaching change of note. Zach will be back with us in a second here. But what do you think with that, though? Do you think that's going to make a big difference here for them?
So, as someone that's watched a lot of Gus Bradley defenses for a couple years, I'll tell you what, the best way to describe Gus Bradley defense is vanilla. It's about as vanilla gets. Coverage is going to be Charmin man is pretty much the best way to put it. It's, we're going to play way off man, mostly just drop into cover 3, stay in front of you, hope we can get a pass rush. And, they're going to be good against the run and, hope that you can't put together a 15-play drive. That's the Gus Bradley defensive philosophy. We hope that you can't put together an 8-minute drive because you're going to have 8 minutes of ball control because we're going to give you everything. And I think Anarumo can at least be as good as that. And I think, the upside is that he's going to be a little more creative. And that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah. Anything you want to add with Anarumo coming in here, Zach?
I mean, like you guys said, it's an upgrade. I think it helps them out. I mean, he was like we said, Anarumo wasn't bad. There was a while when we were talking about him among
that 2021 Bengals defense was phenomenal.
Yeah,
but
they decided to go full bore on the offense, and you can only do so much when you have nothing. So I think it's a good change.
His reward for being really good was here, have nothing and see if you can still do it. And he was like, well. I mean, at some point, even I can't do anything about it. He's like, and they're like, all right, bye.
Like, defense is one of those things you have to keep drafting.
Yeah, you have to at least add players and pieces all the time. Like, it's just defense is generally more, I don't want to say fluky, but more high variance, right? Because it is. So you don't want to leave nothing because nothing is still nothing, no matter how high or low variance your defense is. So, well, let's move on to the off-season moves. Specifically, let's talk about the offensive moves first here. So they lose quarterback Joe Flacco, who is now maybe still going to play for, I don't know. They lose Will Fries, who admittedly I think it's Freeze actually. I don't forget if it's Fries or Freeze, but they lose him, but really only had him for a small chunk of last year. He played very, very well in that chunk and gets paid handsomely by the Vikings because of that, but still a loss that they won't have him there. Ryan Kelly, a longtime center, they lose him as well. They plan on placing him with Wisconsin's Tanner Bortolini, who did play well last year when he did play, so we'll say about that. And then they signed Daniel Jones to be the maybe starting quarterback or maybe not. I want to take a second to talk about this because if the problem with this move for me is not even that I think Daniel Jones is like going to be so terrible if he has to play, because Shane Steichen, his offense is something that with a mobile quarterback like Jones can be, I think there is a certain floor there that is going to be probably a better version of Daniel Jones that we were getting with the Giants, because the Giants were terrible. Like they were bad in pretty much every way you could be bad as a football team. I think the Colts in general are a pretty good football team that's held back by said quarterback play. So I think that he'll probably look better than he did at any point in the last couple of years for the Giants. The problem is it still can't be your solution in a year where you're probably coaching for your job. Like that realistically, there's a good chance that if this season doesn't go better than last year, that he's gone. And I don't know if I'm comfortable personally with Daniel Jones being the answer at quarterback if Anthony Richardson is in fact still unable to throw the ball in a straight line, which by all accounts is mostly still the case. So for me, it's tough. Go ahead, Zach.
Is that Shane Steichen's fault?
I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm saying if I'm Shane Steichen and they give me Daniel Jones, I'm going to be like, well, I don't know.
This is where I would hope that the ownership and front office might have some wherewithal and say, hey, this quarterback selection was horrific. And like you got dealt this hand, you might get one more shot with a different person that might have played more than 16 college football games. Because while we can acknowledge that there was a lot of talent and a lot of hopefulness surrounding Anthony Richardson, his inexperience is absolutely shown throughout the entirety of this. And I really feel like he's the one that's playing for this job. If Daniel Jones ends up playing this season, I don't think Anthony Richardson has a job in the NFL.
Maybe not. But Dalton, I know you have a lot to say here. Probably.
Unpopular opinion. I think that the Colts got better at the quarterback position this offseason.
I don't know if that's unpopular. I think that their floor is so much higher.
It's not unpopular. Why I don't view them that highly.
Here's the thing. So I think he's enough. I think he's going to complete well over 60% of his passes, probably at over 65 in this offense, given what he's done with the Giants in awful situations with the Giants. Mm-hmm. This is by far the best situation that Daniel Jones has ever been in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Also, so he's gonna run the passing game as well as Joe Flacco did, I think, when Flacco was playing in this offense, at least. And then on top of that, he gives you his mobility, which I think is a big X factor.
Yeah.
When you factor that in, because the lack of mobility from Flacco, I think is a big reason why they felt like they had to go back to Richardson.
It was a hindrance.
Aside from the fact that, you invested a first-round pick.
Yeah, there's no point in getting Flacco.
You have to play him.
Point, yeah.
But I do think, I think Daniel Jones is going to probably – I'd be surprised if they don't find a way to just give him the starting job day one, week one of the regular season. I think they're going to have to. I think it's going to be very obvious that he is putting his team in the best position to win. And, I mean, if he's a little bit better than Flacco was last year, this team's a borderline playoff team.
That's the thing, is the quarterback position is what's going to determine whether this relatively strong roster means anything in 2025. That's what it's going to come down to.
And I think Daniel Jones might low-key thrive, at least whatever thriving looks like for Daniel Jones.
Not shitting his
that's what we're
pants
going
on
to see
every
in this
snap.
offense.
Yeah.
Just you wait next week until we hear that the Colts have announced that Anthony Richardson is getting thumb surgery and he's out for the entire
year. I would almost guarantee you something like that's going to happen, though, at least for the first few weeks, long enough where they can solidify Jones.
Right. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
No, I agree. I agree heavily. I think the addition of Jones makes them better. The longer that Anthony Richardson starts, the lower I am on this team, because unfortunately, as much talent as he has, I think that's probably better served in other areas of the offense and not quarterback position. You can throw a ball really far, but the man's athletic. That's why you want it. And I think you bring up a great point, Dalton, that you're not sacrificing anything in the run game aspect if you put Daniel Jones back there. So, you're not losing something that you had with we point out with Flacco. So, what reason do you not have if he's going to complete more than 50% of his passes?
Anthony Richardson struggles to do every week.
His current completion percentage is 50.6 for his career. That is not good.
Yeah.
He is so bad at throwing the football.
Talk to it. You know, the funny thing, the thing I love about Anthony Richardson, right, is that up to this point, he has been the first quarterback in a long time where I think he's legitimately the full spectrum of quarterback play, right? Because we've seen guys like Jameis Winston who can be really good, but then be catastrophically bad, right? Truly can't be on the field, can't play with this guy bad. And we've seen the rookie version of Josh Allen where he would make spectacular plays and do stupid stuff. Anthony Richardson last season might have made the greatest throw in NFL history. I think you could make an argument his throw against the Texans for a touchdown when getting hit, falling backwards, was the greatest throw I've ever seen in my entire life. But he also can't complete 50% of his passes. It is truly remarkable that he's able to do both of those things in an NFL season. It's really awesome. And part of me wants him to keep playing to see how far he can take that style of play. But I also acknowledge you can't play quarterback with someone who plays like that and consistently win, because you just don't know what's going to happen every week. It's incredible stuff.
I don't. Yeah, on that same line, I don't understand how this man has some of the most flawless deep ball accuracy that you can ever see, but then he can't throw a 2-yard out.
He just doesn't have
he can't
the
throw
mechanics, man.
a screen in the backfield because like it's just no, it's not real far away. I don't have to use all of Cannon,
He just doesn't have the feel.
It's like
for
when
I
play disc golf. Whenever I play disc golf and I have approach shots, I only have one throw speed. It's throw. Everybody else talks about like, oh yeah, you got to take some off. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. This arm goes one speed. That's Anthony Richardson. It is only deep. If it's not deep, I'm sorry. That 2-yard out is going to be 7 yards out of your reach.
It's tough because again, that's why I kind of want to see him continue to play and see if he can get any sort of semblance of accuracy down. Because if he doesn't have to complete 65% of his passes if he can hit some of the big plays that he does already do sometimes, but you cannot miss 5-yard. You cannot miss 5-yard routes as much as you just simply can't do it.
You can't miss the dink and dunks. The dink and dunks
that's what get the offense moving and put you in a position to be able to drop back on 2nd and 3 and launch a 60-yarder to Alec Pierce or whoever. Like that's what gets you the ability to do that. And if he can't add that to his game, it's over for him. And he's going to end up in like Philly. Like we think every quarterback's going to end up at some point. He's going to hit some bombs to AJ Brown in like a Week 17 game when Jalen Hurts breaks his finger or whatever, and he'll get a $20 million a year contract from like I don't know whoever. Probably my luck be the Steelers, and that's what's going to happen. So that's the trajectory.
I don't think the Eagles would ever sign him because I just don't think he's consistent enough at complete.
Something like that. Yeah, something like
it'll
that.
He'll go to
Ironically,
Dallas.
I was
the new
thinking
Trey Lance in Dallas.
And they already got Joe Milton.
Ironically, I was thinking they would sign him because that's all they need their quarterback to do is just launch some balls down the field every now and then.
They could just do the ultimate Jalen Hurts offense of run the ball with him or throw it 50 yards down the field. They could just an even more simplified Jalen Hurts offense. No, but the quarterback position it's certainly one of the quarterback rooms of all time.
God bless. Oh, it's certainly a quarterback position.
Getting into the draft picks on offense, Tyler Warren, obviously the big one, which was the most no doubt lock pick of all time. We knew this was going to happen if he made it there. Jalen Travis along the offensive line, gifted guy. We'll see what happens with him. DJ Giddens, running back out of Kansas State, a big fan of him. And then I had to throw Riley Leonard in here because what a funny, again, this quarterback room is so funny, dude. You have one dude who's weirdly athletic and is kind of able to throw the ball. One dude who's maybe the most athletic player in the history of his position, but can't throw the ball. And then you have just the can't throw the ball version of the first guy as your third quarterback. It's the funniest. It's one of the funniest quarterback rooms you could possibly build in the NFL.
Yeah, it's really funny. But the draft, I thought, I don't know if it was really they knocked it out of the park. It was more like the Bears kind of set them up by not drafting Tyler Warren.
Yeah, they wanted a specific type of tight end instead of just the best one.
Whatever.
That's what happened there. That's what happened there.
And they let the Colts get, in my opinion, the best offensive player in the best offensive weapon in this draft class. Purely offensive. No. Hunter does a lot.
Travis,
I think from a pure offensive weapon standpoint, I think Warren just gives you so much. And I think in this offense, it is really perfect, especially regardless of, especially if Daniel Jones ends up being your quarterback. Because if it's Richardson, he's not going to be able to hit him anyways.
If he can't hit Tyler Warren, then we're really in trouble.
We're already at that point, Shane. He's cooked.
Well, I know.
He's cooked.
I'm just saying we're really in trouble.
He's not good
because that dude will catch anything in his vicinity. So,
but you add Warren to this offense, especially you assume, hopefully Jonathan Taylor can keep it going. They've got some good depth at running back too behind Taylor. Wide receiver room, I think solid enough, anyways. And the offensive line still good enough.
Yeah, I think they've done a good job
multiple
of
offense.
investing
think
in
it works.
backups there. Yeah, I like to think so.
The Colts sneakily have one of those wide receiver rooms when you look on paper and you're like, huh? Then you watch the game and you're like, oh, I didn't know you guys did that. Because like that, I can't complain about their wide receiver room at all.
No.
I mean, all three of them, Pittman, Jr., Downs, and Pierce, they've all been thriving, which surprisingly with what they've had to deal
Pittman
with.
was banged up last year and still was pretty productive. If he's healthy, he could be back to himself. Yeah.
Year 2 AD Mitchell might be interesting.
Maybe if he can learn how to run routes not in practice.
Mitchell,
by the way, did you see some of the routes he's putting on in the first preseason game? I swear something's wrong with him. AD Mitchell.
Who?
AD Mitchell. Oh. He legitimately he was routing dudes up in like the joint scrimmage, and then his routes he was running in the preseason game legitimately looked like a toddler trying to figure out how to run around. I don't know what's wrong with him. If he could just figure out like what his deal is, I think he could be awesome. I loved him last year, so we'll see with him. But in the receiving room, again, like you go up and down this roster, and we'll talk about the defensive stuff here in a second. There's not a lot of actual like holes on this roster. There's places that you wish you could be better at, but they're not like, oh man, this is going to keep us from winning 10 games. You know, the specific hole in the roster, except for, of course, the most important freaking one, where you're hoping Daniel Jones is good. Like that's kind of the best outcome, probably, if we're being realistic, is that Daniel Jones is like not a disaster. Which again, probably won't be in this offense. I think he'll be okay. But like, is the 24th best quarterback good enough for this team? I don't think so.
Come on now, don't count out Jason Bean.
Oh, of course, the Bean.
The Bean,
the man, the myth, the Bean.
It's really what it all hinges on is the quarterback.
That's what it comes down to. Let's talk about the defensive moves real quick, because there was a decent amount of moves made here. They do lose some edge, especially I think the biggest loss here is the edge rusher Dayo Oriangbo to the Bears. One of the easiest free agent. The Bears getting Dennis Allen and then signing him is so funny because it's like exactly what they would do. Like that Dennis Allen probably has wanted him on his team since he was in the draft, and every year since then. That's just kind of how that works with them. They lose.
You just didn't have the money.
They lose linebacker EJ Speed, safety Julian Blackman, who's a good player but still not nothing special there. Taven Bryan's still kicking around the league. Good for him. Draft us once upon a time to the Jaguars. And then they signed Charvarius Ward, huge pickup if he could get back to what he was. Obviously, last year you kind of give him a pass for everything he dealt with personally, losing his daughter. You hope that everything's good with him this year. They bring in Cam Bynum, which is huge for this defense in the secondary with what Anarumo likes to do with the safeties. He has a lot of those guys. That's why it's bad that the Bengals had no safeties, part of why they weren't good last year, because he expects a lot out of those guys. And then they draft JT Tuimoloau and corner Justin Wally, who unfortunately is already out for the year with a ACL. So it's really just Tuimoloau as far as the draft picks there. But what do you think with the defense this year with what they did in free agency and the draft here, Dalton?
So I think, a lot of the guys they lost, I think were kind of just letting go to make room for some guys that they've got coming along. I think really the big one, obviously, letting Oingwo leave, that just kind of frees up room for Latu, who I think is kind of ready to probably have a bigger role. Also, you draft JT Tuimoloau, who might have at least a third down role, I think, possibly in this defense right away. I think also the emergence of Kwity Paye, I think, kind of really makes that loss a lot easier. In the secondary, I think the secondary too is still getting better. I think Charvarius Ward, like you said, assuming he can get back to what he was, that could be a really good addition. I think the defense, I think they're going to stay about what they've been, which is pretty solid.
Yeah, I think ultimately you look at this depth chart now and you go 4 or 5 deep at edge with guys that can play, that at least you think you can play. Do they get something out of Samson Ebukam now that he's back as well? That's another name to watch out for. Kwity Paye has been fine. I think he's a fine player. I think that you obviously would like to upgrade, and that's what they hope that Tuimoloau is going to be ultimately for them. But you have Buckner in the middle of the defense still, Grover Stewart in the middle of the defense still. You really honestly, like in the secondary, if everybody's healthy, especially Juju Brents doesn't even have to be a starter for this team when he struggled to stay on the field. So if he can play a little bit less but can still play a role, Jalen Jones is really good last year. He's currently slated to start opposite of Trevarius Ward. Nick Cross started to come into his own as a strong safety for them. We kind of know, again, what Cam Bynum's about. Kenny Moore continues to be a good nickel corner. Like this defense overall, there's no like part of it where like, oh man, we're worried that this is going to tank the defense or tank the season. Like there's talent at every part of the defense. It's just, is it going to be a top 10 unit or is it going to be just a middle pack unit? I think that's really the only question with them.
Yeah, they did enough to just tread water and from what they lost and what they gained. It's pretty much just you're good. Which again, we talked about a unit that wasn't necessarily that bad last year. They were coming along at the end of the season. We just all know what the issue is here.
Yeah. So let's get into expectations for this team. And I think it's pretty clear for me, and I'll kick things off. They have to figure out a way to get at least competent quarterback play out of the guys that is in this room. Whether that's starting Anthony Richardson from the get-go and seeing if he could figure out enough to be a competent starter, whether it's pulling the plug on that right away, making it very clear that he's not the answer, and then going with Daniel Jones, hoping he can do the same thing, or whatever combination of things you have to do, whoever starts or whatever, you have to eventually get to a point where you know what you're getting out of the quarterback position. If you can't figure something out this year with one of these two guys, I just think the team is not going to get where it needs to go. I don't think this is a playoff team if one of those two can't be at least the 20th best quarterback in the NFL. And that's not a huge bar to clear, but it kind of is for this team because they haven't gotten quarterback play that good in quite some time. Probably Phillip Rivers 1 year there was the last time you had top 20 quarterback play. That's been a long time. He's
that also might have been like 20.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on how you feel about
that was his last season in the NFL. Yeah. There's a reason he didn't come back.
Right. So that's my expectations, like that they figure out quarterback play enough to contend for this division. And with the Texans team, that again, we have some question marks we'll get to with them in a minute, but like you have to be able to make good on a roster that is very talented. It just needs enough from the quarterback spot. That's what it comes down to. So, but what do you think, Dalton?
I think really what it's going to come down to is Shane Steichen willing, and also is he allowed to just commit to Daniel Jones? Like, are they going to, as an organization, just accept that like the Anthony Richardson pick did not work and move on? Because if they try to make it work, I do think like the thing is for them to make the playoffs this year, the margin of error is going to be razor thin. And they need Daniel Jones. In my opinion, they need Jones starting the entire year for them to make the playoffs. If they do that, I think they're going to be fine just because, I mean, this is generally the same offense and same system that made Gardner Minshew look like a competent, real NFL quarterback. And he's not. He's a clown.
He's not.
A clown pretending to be an NFL quarterback.
That's a Raiders fan talking if I've ever heard one, bro.
And Daniel Jones, I think, is much better than Gardner Minshew, if I'm being completely honest.
And the bar is not particularly high.
The bar's not high, but I think that's really where we're at. And I really think this team should be pretty solid if Jones is allowed to start. But it's just a matter of organizationally, are they willing to do that? Because it does mean you have to say that this guy that we traded up to get in the first round, we are in year 3 saying, no, this is not working.
It's over, guys. It's Joe. Yeah, that's the thing. Anything you want to add there, Zach, with expectations you have?
The only thing I have to add is if Steichen has the ability to do that, it's because they would have had to fire Ballard, because I think that's the only reason that Richardson starts this season is, again, I think that Ballard's job is more on the line here with the Richardson.
Probably.
And because he's been there for quite some time. And I think that some voices are pretty loud to say, yo, man, This isn't working. You're not evaluating correctly. You're not making the right moves. Yes, the rest of the team is fine, but when it comes to what's most important, we don't have that. We don't have the quarterback since Andrew Luck. So what are you doing to do this? You haven't done anything. And I honestly, like, if they go Daniel Jones week 1, you might as well just have the owner walk into Ballard's office and be like, hey, either you can make it through the season, you might as well just walk out now because you're not going to continue after this and kick off that search. I don't think it's going to be good. Even if Daniel Jones starts, we know this team is good, but there's a reason why Daniel Jones wasn't the greatest at his other stops either. And I just don't see it being I have very low expectations for this team. I definitely think that they are dropping down into the 3rd place. I don't think they'll be worse than the Titans. I'm not going to go crazy, but I just don't think it's going to be good.
Well, let's talk about that part of it. So let's do a win total range. Zach, you obviously have a probably lower floor for them than maybe Dalton. So let's see what you have to say here on the win total range.
I'm going to say 4 wins. I think their ceiling is where I might be a bit more harsh on some other people. I really only see them winning about like 8 games max. I don't think that this is going to be a successful season. I don't think they sniff the playoffs. I think it's going to be very clear from this. I don't even know if it's going to, I think what's going to end up happening is they start the season with Anthony Richardson. They hold on too long. And then there's some glimmer of hope. And they're like, oh, well, if we put Daniel Jones in right now, we might be able to make the playoffs. And it's a little bit too late. And they reach that 8-win mark that way. But I think that they're going to be more so in the 5-6 win area and really just left looking for some answers next offseason that they probably should have addressed this past offseason.
Fair enough. I have their floor at 7. I think this roster is just kind of too good to bottom out more than that when they could have easily done that last year and didn't. I think the defensive coaching will be better. I think the overall offense is going to be a little bit better because I expect that the only way that they would be worse is if Daniel Jones is even worse than what they got out of the quarterback room last year, which I don't think is going to be the case. So they really only can go up there, in my opinion. Either Anthony Richardson does figure out enough to hold on to the job, which would require him to be better than last year, or Daniel Jones just wins the job and is just better than either him or Flacco was last year. So, but I think 7 wins is kind of the lowest I'm willing to go with this team. And then I think 10 is also the ceiling. I don't see a really big range here. I don't think the ceiling of this team is very high. I don't think it's designed to be high right now. I think they wanted to build this roster up and then insert the quarterback. They just inserted one that can't play right now, right? So and probably won't be able to play realistically. So I think for Ballard, I want to mention Ballard real quick here. I think he's the perfect example of why the quarterback position in the NFL matters so much, because if you look at everything he's done besides the quarterback position, it's hard to argue that he isn't a really good GM. Like, he's drafted very well overall. He's built a really strong roster from top to bottom. You could argue he doesn't utilize free agency enough, but there's plenty of GMs who don't do that often, and they're fine. It's just he hasn't been able to find either the right veteran quarterback or the right young quarterback. And if you are in that situation, you can't keep your job very long, despite the fact he's been able to. So, but what do you have for this?
Yeah, on Ballard real quick, I am just curious. I think this year, if he's willing to move on from Richardson, I think that would I think that should save his job, in my opinion, if he's willing. Because like the draft is a crapshoot,
Yeah.
He swung, he missed, and I'm just very curious if at this point, if it's him forcing the issue and trying to make the Richardson thing work, or was that Jim Irsay saying, no, you have to make this work? So I think that's going to be kind of interesting. Because I think if he's willing to just move on and just say, you know what, Jones is the best quarterback on the roster, he's going to be the starter. Steichen, you are not obligated to keep playing Anthony Richardson. I think that would be a win for Ballard. And I'm a little more optimistic on this team this year. I do have the lower floor at 6 wins just because I do see a world where, if Richardson is playing a little bit, or even if Jones is playing and like Jonathan Taylor regresses or gets hurt, because running backs are a fickle thing in this league.
They are.
And that team won 8 games last year solely because of
Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. And the occasional Alec Pierce 70-yard touchdown.
Yeah. Really, that was the only reason. I mean, you look at every game they won, he's rushing for
like
150 yards just about.
Yeah.
He was a huge reason why. But I think the floor is 6 wins. There's definitely a world where this doesn't go well, but my ceiling's 11 wins. I think 11 wins, playoff. They're even in the mix for the division if Houston really falls off. But I mean, that is like the ultimate. Like Daniel Jones has his best season of his career, and Lou Anarumo takes the defense back to being a fringe top 10 unit. I think that's kind of what would have to happen for that to be the case. But I think the pieces are there. I'll say that.
Fair enough. And let's finish up this conversation with the Houston Texans, the reigning division champions, the very hyped team going into last year that didn't quite reach the heights that people thought, mostly because of an offensive line that was just absolutely dreadful in the middle of it. And of course, what did they do? Get worse at the offensive line, which is funny. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's talk about the only major coaching move that they made. And it's a big one because they're hoping it fixes some of the schematic issues that led to the offensive line being so poor in 2024. They fire offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, who was getting head coach interest after his first season. Funny how things change in the NFL very quickly sometimes. And they replace him with the Rams passing game coordinator Nick Caley, who, if you're coming from the Rams system, always usually a good thing for the most part in the NFL. So we'll see if he can replicate some of that Rams success. But that's the biggest change they made, and really the only major change they made on the offensive side of the ball, specifically at the coaching position. What do we think about the switch to more of the Rams style version of like the Shanahan-McVay offense versus kind of what Slowick was doing, which was more of the true like Shanahan style part of it? I want to see what Dalton thinks about that one first.
I mean, I think in an offense where it has to be C.J. Stroud is the focal point of that offense, I think this switch makes sense. Because I do think I think Stroud from year 1 to year 2 at best stagnated. At best he was the same quarterback from year
I think
1.
he was the same caliber player in my opinion. I think it just things didn't work as well as they did in his rookie year. That's what I think personally.
And I think you need somebody else to come in if he is going to take that next step. And I think Caley could do that, bringing in a lot of the concepts from that Rams system. I think there's a lot that could really benefit Stroud. So I think overall that's a good move as far as a coaching standpoint.
Zach, any thoughts on that move there?
Only besides that the Shanahan-McVay tendrils spread further throughout the NFL and are continuing
as they tend to do. Let's talk about the offensive moves that were made because there were several interesting ones. So they lose Stephon Diggs, who was playing relatively well before he went down with the ACL. He's now a member of the Patriots. Robert Woods, who continued to be the veteran presence type of guy after a really strong career for a long time in similar offenses to what they ran last year and this year. The big one, though, and the subsequent moves after, traded Laramie Tunsil to the Commanders for several draft picks.
The gift that keeps on giving.
There's that. Signed Cam Robinson, who by all and large was the worst starting offensive tackle in all of football last year from a numbers perspective. If you look at pressures allowed and things of that nature. So we'll see about that. Laken Tomlinson, who was part of a absolutely dreadful Seahawks interior offensive line. So again, not sure about that one. They bring in Nick Chubb, who they hope isn't completely washed, but I would argue, unfortunately, probably is. But we'll see.
Well, is his leg functioning currently?
Maybe, at least from a injury standpoint, it is. From a actually still being good standpoint, probably not.
Here's the question.
I was going to say that man.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go. You're good. No, you're good.
Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, and Dameon Pierce make one in their prime running back in the aggregate?
Yes, probably.
Maybe.
I think Joe Mixon still has a lot left.
He was very good last year, but he is dealing with a
just got hit by a couple. He just got dinged up a couple
nondescript
times.
foot injury. That was not.
Yeah.
That was listed as a non-football injury, which is interesting.
But running back years are like dog years.
This is true. He does have a lot of tread taken off those tires. And honestly, Nick Chubb, if it wasn't the injuries, he wouldn't have that much tread taken off his tires. But he kind of continues to have the tires get knocked off the car and have to be replaced, which is part of the problem. But again, he's there, which is cool. We have to talk about Tunsil for a second here, because you could make a pretty strong argument that he's still one of the 3 best pass protectors in the sport. And they traded him despite.
He's had a bad season.
I mean, he didn't have a bad season. The offensive line had a bad season. He was still one of the best pass protectors in the sport.
He had some penalty issues,
and that's fine. Guess what? You know what's really cool about playing tackle is when you protect the quarterback. If you get some penalties, I'll live with it if my quarterback isn't killed. That's just me.
For this team, though, and again, going back to my Miami roots, pre-snap penalties are drive destroyers.
For sure.
Yeah. And if you have somebody that is, but again, we're talking about one season of this, though. That's not something where you're like, hey, yo, get him out of here.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, again, you don't usually trade top 5-ish pass protectors at tackle really ever, but especially not whenever they still are young enough to stick around for a while. And clearly the best player on the offensive line specifically, at least, for anything less than a haul. And unfortunately, I wouldn't say they got a haul in general. So that's ultimately what I'm wondering about is, he had, again, 19 penalties. It's a lot of penalties for an offensive lineman to have. It is. Like, it's not something that I want to ignore entirely. It is something that he had to clean up. But again, that's not something that's very common to see happen a ton. To give you an idea, Cam Robinson, right, who's going to be this team's tackle this year, left tackle, had 10 penalties. It wasn't like he had none. He still had plenty himself, and he's maybe half as good of a tackle as Tunsil at best. So it's just the offensive line, it might be the worst in the sport this year, and it might be the worst in the sport by some amount of margin there. Like, it's very possible that's the outcome you get with this group. And the fact that that's the case is why this Texans team, despite being the most talented in this division, in my opinion, has a certain floor that they had before this year that I don't think they do anymore necessarily, especially on offense. So that's my biggest concern with this team is, did they do enough? And they did in the draft. They added a lot of talent on offense, especially on offense. Jaden Higgins in the second round, Ariante Ursery in the second round, Jalen Noel as well. Woody Marks is a fun, change of pace back. Graham Mertz, Wisconsin fan, and we just cringed a lot. But again, let me put it this way. Ursery better be able to win a starting job for this team right away and be very good. And I know Dalton is probably going to chime in here and say that's the case. I do not think that's going to happen.
He's listed as a starter on the depth chart already.
Right, which, again, makes sense considering who they have at the position. Yeah. I'm very unsure that he's going to be anything more than a backup level tackle as a rookie. So that concerns me a lot, even if he probably is better than, Cam Robinson, who is still probably going to start, I think, at left tackle anyway. But, yeah, go ahead, Dalton. I know you probably.
He's listed at the top of the depth chart at right tackle now.
That's what I thought.
Which I think eventually he's going to become the left tackle. I think this year, there's going to be growing pains. I thought he was a guy that probably should, even though I was really high on him, I did think that, he's a guy that, maybe he's your swing tackle or right tackle at the beginning as he's learning, and then becomes your left tackle later on. But I do think the reps are going to be good for him. I mean, I don't know. I watched a lot of him holding up pretty well. You watched that Penn State game last year. He held up very well against some pretty good edge rushers from Penn State. And I don't know. I think he'll be fine. Another name to watch as far as additions go that could possibly be a stopgap in that at left tackle. They did sign Trent Brown, who I know he had a knee injury last year.
He's already hurt, though.
I
will say.
He is.
It's a little bit I didn't want to factor him in too much, but he is a better tackle than everyone else on the roster if he's healthy, probably. So
everyone else.
there's that.
Yeah, he's at least he at least takes a while to get around.
He's very much that type, right? Like if he again when we've seen him last time we saw him play significant snaps, he was fine.
Yeah,
You just don't be doing that is the thing. You don't be
correct.
playing games.
Oh,
So
I
you,
know.
yeah. So you hope
You
that
know
he
more
can,
than anybody.
I know you do, yeah. So it's interesting, but this offensive line has real potential to be at least bottom 5, if not worst in the league
Correct.
this year. So that's a concern for me. But I like the receivers they added with Higgins and getting both the Iowa State guys with him and Noel. Like that is really impressive depth to have right away, and then starters in the near future, if not right away.
And Kirk.
And you bring in Kirk. We mentioned that earlier with the trade for nothing, basically, who somehow made the contract that he signed end up being kind of fine and ended up being like nothing when you think about the receiver market, what it's done since then.
Well, yeah, I mean, you trade them nothing because you have to
literally,
take on that salary.
And it's fine. I think if he's healthy, he'll be a really good slot receiver for them. But again, all the talent on offense, especially the offensive skill positions, it's all there, and you have C.J. Stroud. I just don't think, and we'll get into that with expectations later, so we can focus on defense in a second. But I don't think the offensive line they're the type of offensive line that is not going to allow them to do the things they want to do. I think at times. That's the difference. I think if your offensive line is good enough to just allow the offense to run the way it's supposed to be run, that's fine. You want more than that, but you can live with that. They are firmly in the category of like they might stop you from doing what you want to do. Like they might keep you from doing what you want to do. So we'll see about that. But let's talk about the defensive moves this team made. There was very few compared to the offense for good reason. This defense was phenomenal last year, and I think they're going to continue to be phenomenal. They do lose safety Eric Murray, so they take a hit at safety there, but they do bring in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as a safety from the Eagles. They traded Kenyon Green, who was god awful, unfortunately, as a first-round pick. A rare first-round guard who was like not just not good, but like unplayable bad, which tough scenes for them. That would have been really helpful if he would have worked out. But they bring in Sheldon Rankins, again, who played for this team, I think, in 2023 before he signed with the Bengals, I want to say it was, and didn't work out. Bring in E.J. Speed from the Colts, actually, as well. Edge Darrell Taylor, who had a really strong year as like a designated pass rusher type for the Bears. Derek Barnett they bring back, who I thought was really good. I was early down run defender type of edge, not really much of a pass rusher, but a solid run defender. And then they do bring in a couple of DBs in the draft, Jalen Smith out of USC and Jalen Reed out of Penn State. Not a lot of notable changes with the defense. I do think the addition of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson makes a lot of sense. But other than that, not a lot to speak on here. But again, this is the unit that we don't have questions about with this team.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is it with defensive backs being named Jalen? They got
I don't
4
know.
of them on the Texans
They
roster.
do got 4 of them, and it's weird, right?
That's just
they have
weird.
a lot of Jalen's, specifically defensive back Jalen's. Yeah,
it's weird. But overall, yeah, I mean, this unit is going to be very, very good. Part of it is because they have a very good defensive coach.
Yes, with D'Amico Ryans, yeah.
That kind of helps. But I mean, there's just so much talent. Depth.
Derek Stingley is phenomenal. Kamari Lassiter was really good as a rookie, despite the questions with his speed. The edge rush duo is just ferocious. I mean, that edge rush duo it's hard to beat that as being your top 2 guys there.
I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson not having to play corner anymore, I think, is going to be a big one.
Being like an actual safety, yeah.
Yeah, like the Eagles trying to make him their number 2 safety was just dumb.
I don't know. It's weird. I think he's going to be a good piece for this defense. I think Jalen Petrie kind of making a name for himself as a true slot player finally, where they stick him there, is really big. Like, again, this defense should be a top 5 unit in the NFL. Like, by all accounts, it should be.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, again, we'll talk about expectations here. Yeah, it has to be, because the expectations I have for this team is that the offense is at least functional. Because if it's functional, C.J. Stroud will make it good. Like, he is the type of quarterback that if you give him a functional unit in front of him, he will make it a good unit. Like he to me is like he's going to be the spiritual successor to Matthew Stafford when Stafford hangs it up. He's very much that like I want to throw that dig route, I want to hit guys over the middle of the field, play action, I want to take deep shots down the field to my top receiver. Like him and Nico Collins have developed a special relationship as a receiving, duo there. Like and being able to link up with huge plays down the field. So.
But if he's getting hit 50 times a year,
Exactly.
work.
Again, he might also be the spiritual successor to Matthew Stafford in the sense that he has a bad back by 29 years old. And you don't want that if you're the Texans. And unfortunately, that's the trend that we're going with right now.
Yep.
Again, like Blake Fisher, who they drafted last year, and Aaron Terry, you kind of have to hope that those two are good fast. Because if they're not, this is going to be a rough group to watch in the trenches up front on offense.
Well, it doesn't look great when you have Arante Arcery as your starter and then Blake Fisher is backing him up on the
like you would love him to emerge as the left tackle or the right tackle, whichever one for this team. Not good rookie season, but again, he was a rookie, so second round pick. You'll see if he can be something. But again, like this offense, I have no idea how to rank it in the league because if you just look at the talent on it outside of the offensive line. This is easily a top 10 unit from a weapons and quarterback standpoint. The offensive line drags it down to the point where it might not even be top 20 by season's end. Like it's possible we get there with this offensive line. That's just kind of sad to see with a quarterback like CJ Stroud and the weapons they have in this offense. So my expectations is that they find a way to make this offense workable and that the defense just takes things from there and they can maintain their stranglehold on this division that they've had the past 2 years. So.
I mean, even if they don't, the other three teams might just hand it to them.
This is possible. We've talked about this. The floor is pretty low on most of these other teams, so it's definitely within in the cards that they don't have to be that good to win this division. But I think if they want to get past the divisional round, they absolutely have to be much better than they've been the last 2 years. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other major expectations you guys want to throw in there?
I don't think so. We can get into win projection.
No, I mean, we talked about some other teams and they all rely on some other things. This is really just hinging on your offensive line, and there's been so many examples of the past few seasons. You really start your team building in the trenches. The protection and the pressure is so important. It sets the table for everything.
Right, and I think let's get into win total range. I'm going to kick things off here because I still think. Because of how good the defense is and because of how much I do believe in CJ Stroud and the weaponry, and they already had to deal with a really rough offensive line, at least interior offensive line last year. I think the floor is like 8 wins. I think they could fall out of the division lead and could lose this division to one of these teams. But I do think that they're going to be competitive throughout the season because of the defense and because Stroud is good enough to kind of work through some of those issues, just maybe not enough to win double-digit games again and win the division again, right? Like I think the floor is still relatively high. The ceiling, I mean, I think 11 is. I think if they could just get back to like 10, 11 wins again is good because they have even lower floor on offense than they did last year, and I don't think the ceiling is any higher despite the upgraded receiver talent overall in the draft because the offensive line is going to probably be so bad. So I think 11 wins is probably the most I'd be willing to give them.
Yeah, I personally, I mean, if they get a unicorn rainbow or they get a unicorn squad, like awesome offensive line play, I could see them winning 11, 12 games. And I'm right there with you with the 8 wins. I don't think that CJ Stroud is that he's too good of a quarterback for, yes, he gets hit a lot. If there's an injury, we'll have a different conversation.
Davis
that
Mills
changes things entirely. But yeah, Davis Mills can't. Caden, or is it Kedon Slovis?
Kedon Slovis.
Kedon Slovis. Okay, yeah.
Journeyman college quarterback.
Yeah. You don't really want to see any of these guys come on the field.
You don't want to see Graham
if Stroud's
out there, Zach. You don't. Okay.
No, I don't want to see Graham Mertz out there, and I actually know who Graham Mertz is.
Unfortunately, I do too.
You really just hope that if Stroud's able to stay on the field, I mean, he has that ceiling or that floor set up really high. I agree with the 8 wins. But you also have guys like Joe Mixon, and you have your receivers that are going to be able to prop this thing up. You really just hope that you can have anything develop for them at all. So I really feel like they're in that 8 to 12 range of like if it's a bad season, yeah, they might be just on the outside looking in at the postseason, and they now know like, oh yeah, no, we need some changes on offensive line, but they easily could just completely not have to deal with that at all.
What do you think, Dalton?
Yeah, I'm a little higher. I think, I mean, for me, I'll say probably 9 or 10 wins is probably the floor. Maybe I'll say 10. 10 is the floor. I just really see, I really struggle to see a world where they don't win 10 games, just considering, yeah, they got rid of Tunsil, but even if they have a gaping hole at left tackle, which they very well might, I just think the defense is so good. The division's not very good. Their schedule is pretty favorable. I think 10. I think they can sleepwalk to 10 wins, and that might even be enough to win the division. And then ceiling is 12 wins. I think if everything looks really good, they put everything together. I think 12 wins is the ceiling. But I mean, I think it's going to be same old. I don't think this team has made the moves to make that jump to being a contender. But
yeah,
they're going to be playing in the wild card round.
Yeah, I think I worry that if they get the wrong matchup in the wild card round, they'll be an early exit with.
Yeah, they might make it. Yeah, they might make it to the second round at best. I think that's probably their ceiling.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of where they're going to be until they figure out the offensive line, which unfortunately it's really hard to get significantly better. Like it would take probably at least 2 or 3 years for them to have a top 10 offensive line right now with the pieces that are there. Like that's kind of the issue. And really, if you want to contend, I think in the NFL, if you want to have any shot at winning a Super Bowl, you got to have a top 10 offensive line. And that's kind of the issue right now is this is their window, and they're squandering it with the offense.
I mean, we saw what happened with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl when their offensive line just couldn't block anybody. Like it didn't matter how good.
The reason why they didn't win.
Yeah, it's good.
The main reason why they lost that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Is because they didn't have an offensive line. Like Joe Tooney is just not a left. Joe Tooney should not be starting in the NFL. Period. Especially not a left tackle on a Super Bowl team. That's insane that they got that far with that.
Yeah, he phenomenal guard, but not a tackle. He just isn't.
He was a phenomenal guard 5 years ago.
I mean, I still think he's probably one of the 3 best pass protectors at guard in the sport right now, as we stand. So
hey, listen, as I can tell you from experience, offensive line talent is not the easiest to find. If it was, then none of these teams would have these struggles. There has been a severe, I wouldn't even say a severe lack of development. It's just very, very, very hard to develop NFL style like offensive line play when you really don't have any sort of ability to simulate that until you get to the NFL.
Yeah, the college game is so different with how the blocking schemes are.
Yeah, and if you're a freak and you can adapt and it's no issues, yes. The issue is we just don't have that enough of them to fill out an offensive line for every team. That's why there's a lot of bad offensive lines that don't even have a piece.
Yet another reason why the NFL needs its own minor league. Been saying it for years. They need to start drafting kids out of high school, putting them on a minor league team. But that's for another show. That's
for another show. Yeah, and we'll skip the division predictions. I think we can all tell like who we think is gonna win the division. And
I think we did it. I mean, the Colts are winning the division.
Oh, of course, they're winning.
Not the Colts. The Texans are winning the division. Sorry,
Texans. Yes,
Texans are winning the division. Colts have a shot at like.
I think our only difference between the three of us is I think that I have the Jaguars over the Colts, and it's Texans, Jaguars, Colts, Titans for me, whereas you guys would have the Jaguars and Colts flipped.
So
yeah, sounds about right.
It's going to be an interesting division. I think that there is a chance, at least, that this isn't comfortably the worst division in the AFC this year, simply because I wonder about some of the AFC North teams. I think the Ravens might be clearly the best one. and the Bengals have their own issues. You know how I feel about my Steelers right now. They're the same but different, and the Browns are the Browns.
We talked about it. We talked about a quarterback clown
Yes.
show today. Oh man, just you wait till the Cleveland Browns.
So
that whole division.
Hopefully by the time we do them, it's a bit more clear.
Right, and we'll get to them much later. We'll finish this series with the North Division later because I do still think that overall, like especially in the NFC, they're the best division in the sport. The NFC North. We'll talk about them later, but that does it for the AFC South, for the South divisions in general. Possibly Thursday, I'm hoping we're going to kick off the East with the NFC East. We'll talk about those teams. Lots to talk about with those teams. Some good, some I would say questionable, to say the least. We'll get to that.
Some laughable.
Yeah, well, Cowboys. Yeah, we'll see what's going on with those teams. Hopefully on Thursday, we're hoping to be with that episode. But for now, that'll do it for us all. We will again hopefully see you here soon. And if you are a fan of one of these teams, yeah, I don't envy any of you really, because there's something about all these teams that would infuriate me. And someone who
I envy some.
Okay, well you're a Dolphins fan, you're a Raiders fan. Hey, the Raiders to me, they had a fun offseason, Dalton. I think they had a fun offseason.
That's one word for it.
I think it was fun. I like a lot of what they did. I don't like everything they did, but you know.
You're saying it wasn't a good idea. You're saying it wasn't a good idea to get rid of the entire back seven of the defense?
Here's the thing. Who cares?
Hey, I'm just ready for next offseason.
Well, Zach, you should be as a Dolphins fan. So there's that. I hope that Tua's head is in the same position it currently is by the end of the season.
Is intact.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, at this point, every Dolphins game where Tua doesn't die on the field is a win.
Very true.
Hey, every game we are able to feel the defense is a win. I'm sorry with the way they're dropping like flies.
That's also fair. But hey, at least you'll be able to watch. Well, maybe not Tyreek Hill. Actually, I don't know. We'll see.
At least I'll be able to wear my Minka Fitzpatrick
That's true.
jersey again with the same
There you
number.
I do hope that he has more than one pass deflection / interception this year for you guys. I do hope he does.
Oh, he should. He's a ball man.
Well, he was. I don't know if he still is, but hopefully that's the case for you guys. That'll do it for us. We'll talk about the AFC relatively soon, though. So, Zach, you can talk however you wish about the Dolphins when we get to that point.
It's not going to be favorable. It's going to be favorable at all.
Oh, don't worry. It won't be.